let me give you an example. So one, I would say, danger of having a concept of difference is boxing that difference into a very narrow definition of how you want to see them. On a grander scale, I can say that race relations in America are pegged into white people are racist until proven otherwise, and black people are victims of racism until proven otherwise. And it just takes it's very difficult actually to prove that we are not victims and being victimized by racism, because like I said, the very mention of race in many people's minds implies racism, and so the discussion itself is very difficult to have. And a discussion like, for example, at a place where I work, I sometimes wonder if the fact that I look like this implies to people, a lot of the hegemonic people, that I'm cool. Because black people are often considered cool. Now, for example, if you're working with young people, and it's a careful balance between young people and adults, because adults want to maintain a sense of authority and distance from young people, and that's really hard when you're perceived as cool. At least the adults perceive it that way, and it breaks down the hierarchy that many of them work hard to establish. But my question is it that in their mind that I'm somehow this, cool guy who kids like, and, dresses in a certain way, and, in a contemporary and cool way and all these things, and has this funky kind of hair. And I love how people love that word funky. It's like permission to say, like, black and cool all in one. Miles Davis and James Brown and Prince, all these really just cool people. All these sports stars that are just like really cool. All these rappers who look really hot. And of course the kids, here in India, people just think that I know about hip hop. I do. I am of the hip hop culture, but then it means that they have their idea of what hip hop is, and so they want to narrow their definition of hip hop and their exposure to hip hop to you. So, like someone who's like, if you know hip hop and all they know is like Akon and 50 Cent, well, that's all they want to talk about. They don't know about Public Enemy. They don't know about KRS-One. They don't even know about Tribe Called Quest. So you end up like educating people a lot, and this is why this is another frustration that I know a lot of people that I've moved around with have, is that people are constantly asking us to educate them. Like we're just like the black resource person, and on one hand, any opportunity that you miss to educate someone is a real missed opportunity. But on the other hand, people got to educate themselves. But you have to want to. And I know that that's the difficult thing, is to want to see things differently. You have to accept that there's a different worldview. And that is not a given, especially if you're a majority person, because so many things around you reinforce your idea of a worldview. That inherently, as a minority, you just perceive things differently. There's no better or worse, but your perspective is very, very different. And my question always is how is that perspective constructed in a society? Are they niggers? Are the majorities niggers? And when subcultures start embracing hip-hop, I'm not just talking about like high school kids thinking hip-hop is cool, but I'm talking about you find movements of people in producing, very critical kinds of hip-hop, and the people who would know about Public Enemy, the people who would know about, Poor Righteous Teachers, the people who would know about even, the late 80s and 90s, when this kind of height of hip-hop, of just people who could express themselves and it not just be licentious bantery, So like, you go to Turkish people in Germany, they're singing hip-hop. And so you work backwards and you say, well, what conditions do Turkish people live in, and how do they relate to the majority? Lo and behold, you find a tiered educational system, you find segregated communities, you find just a disdain for anything that's different about them. You go to the so-called Maghreb people in France, the Northern Africans, and same thing. So much so that, same thing, rioting, I think white people's worst fear. And that's the good thing about the Jeremiah Wright scandal and the presidential Democratic campaign, the primaries, is that Jeremiah Wright showing his ass basically showed the world that's the angry nigger that people think will come out of Barack Obama. So he was able to distance himself from that angry nigger. So I really foresee that this campaign is going somewhere, and that despite the majority culture's resistance to actually having a meaningful discussion about race and racism also, but just how race is constructed in our society, and the legacy of our varied forms of institutionalized racism, from slavery to Jim and James Crow to Jim and Jane Crow and their kids. But the legacy of all of this, I think we will have to start to explore, because a lot of people are very unhappy with maintaining the facade of freedom and liberty when it exists. Like here in India, it needs an underclass to maintain itself. Again,